yeah. So they record this and it goes. You guys, you get people coming on to.
Yes, it's live. Yeah.
Yeah.
Facebook and Instagram.
Is there high five? Yes. Yeah, so we'll have to tell Joy to.
Rolling, we're all set to go. I'll use just my phone to introduce you. I can yell very loud, so don't worry about setting up another mic for having enough issues. Thank you everybody for joining us this evening. We're just doing our final touches, just about to get our presentation going tonight. Tonight we are presenting Understanding the Keto Diet with Dr. Charney. So she's here on behalf of Now Foods Canada and Nature's Fair Markets, kind of give us a whole rundown of the keto lifestyle, keto dieting, everything you need to know from A to Z. Tonight, attendees will be able to receive 15% off regular price merchandise all throughout the store, which includes everything from our keto-friendly supplements to our keto-friendly ready-to-go snacks in the bistro to all of our keto-friendly foods. So without further ado, may I introduce Dr. Charney.
Thank you. Hello to everybody. So this is my second consumer talk on the keto diet. I've done more trainings to some of the people in the stores, but I really like this. I never know what I'm going to get. I never know my audience, so I have to be on my feet, and I like that. And I think this is a really interesting topic. And I think for many people who are interested in the keto diet, they often have already listened maybe to other speakers or got information elsewhere. So I don't believe anyone's ever 100% right in their opinion, but I just want to offer my perspective tonight. I think I'm fairly unbiased because I don't have a real, I'm here to inform and not to necessarily promote something. I want everybody to just think about things, make up your own mind, and do whatever's best for you. And that's how I approach my practice with my patients. I was never a specific advocate of one type of diet, but I do have certain principles underlying that I think are important, and I like to be as truthful and well-rounded as I can. So with that, I just wanted to, and I didn't ask this last night, to just so that I know you a little bit better, to ask who here has been on this diet before, just so I have an idea. Okay, so maybe half of you. Okay, and who here is absolutely new to this topic? Okay, a few. So I'm going to try to cater to all of you. Now if I go into a little bit more detail of the science, because some people like that, don't worry about it. You don't have to understand everything I say to get the idea. So for some of you, that will be the more juicy details, and for others, you can tune out at certain parts if you don't want to. But hopefully, you'll walk away with something new to think about, all of you, and that will help you make better decisions. And hopefully no one in the front is going to be getting a lot of neck pain, because it's quite high up. So I just want to make a quick introduction to the company I work for. It is the Now brand, and I feel very privileged to be training for them. I practice as a naturopathic doctor for, I think, 13 years or so. Didn't think I'd ever would work for a company, but it's really a pleasure because it's a family-owned company for the last 50 years, which is very unusual. And I've met them, they're lovely people, and I'm happy to be in this position. They also are really lovely because they never pressure me to do or say anything that I don't believe in. So, I can have my own thoughts, but still love the company. And just in very short, they have won numerous recognitions and awards in a very broad area. So for their environmental efforts, because they have manufacturing and laboratory facilities, so very green. They've won a lot of awards for their lines, different lines, and they've even been recognized as one of the best and brightest companies to work for. So, okay, so now into the details. So the first thing I just want to say about the keto diet, in a very broad sense, is this is kind of your evolutionary inheritance. We've all evolved to be able to respond to the possibility of being in a state of starvation where we have no food. Luckily, none of us have to worry about that, but that's what when we go into ketosis, it's your body's backup. When you have no food, your body is going to go into a mode where you're using your fat stores, because for the good and for the bad, there's no limits to the human body in terms of how much fat we can store. We can store fat infinitely. Whereas for sugar, which is normally our main source of energy, we actually can store very little. So we run out of it very quickly. We have to keep on getting it in our diet. So normally, just like a car, we have to run on fuel. And there are three kinds of fuels that you can run on: carbohydrates or sugars, proteins, but that's not a very good fuel because we don't want to start eating up our own muscles, and fats. And ketones, so this diet we call ketosis, is a breakdown product that comes from fats. So normally our body enjoys the carbohydrates, that's the preference. So your carbohydrates are like the refrigerator upstairs in your house or in your kitchen. You can get to them really quickly, get to the refrigerator. Normally your fats are like that freezer down in the basement that, only once in a while you go down there. Your body does not want to access those fats too readily. That's in a normal state. What happens when we go into ketosis in this diet, it's like we take that freezer from the basement and bring it up, so now it's really easy to get to. So this is a very general idea of what the ketose or the keto diet looks like. We have mostly fats in our diet, so if we look at it a ratio, very high fats, some protein, but not a lot, and a really little bit of carbohydrates. And there's no absolute set amount, but this particular diet evolved not for weight loss or some of the uses today, but it came about, as you may know, to help namely children who were resistant to drugs to treat epilepsy. And they found that this diet was very effective. When drugs came out, it kind of fell out of favor. So initially, actually, it was even higher in the fat level, so even up to 90% of the diet was fats. Now it's slightly more moderate. So there's a range, and if you go online, you might see slight differences, but that's essentially what it's like. Some, or many bloggers and such will say strictly no more than 20 grams of carbohydrates, but I've certainly heard of many people and different expert opinions that say it's not really that strict. Some people can be fine at 40 or 50. There's flexibility. We're all individuals, and there's no one solution that's best for everybody. And then generally speaking, you'll find tons of stuff online about how to do the diet, but generally speaking, the focus is going to be on these foods. So any animal foods are compatible as long as they're not low fat, obviously, so unprocessed. And then any kind of oils or fats, whether it's from a vegetable or animal. Here's where you get different opinions, but nuts and seeds, generally speaking, some nuts like chestnuts are very high in carbohydrates, but generally speaking, nuts are good. Non-starchy vegetables, so there's some vegetables that are more stabilizing for your blood sugar, and fruits are generally discouraged, but again, it depends. Some experts would say, don't be so restrictive on the fruits, and some say just berries, and it depends. So there is no absolute way of doing the keto diet because it's something that's new and it's still evolving and it's not a strict science. I feel like this is moving around. Oh, okay, I want to drop there. Should I get that back up? All right. Guys, just wave at me if all of a sudden my voice disappears because I might just keep on going. So there's common restrictions like starchy foods, the sweeter vegetables, which technically they're fruits, but that's okay. Most fruits and legumes and lentils are generally not on the keto diet. So that's just a broad look at it. Now there's lots of books here on the keto diet, so you don't need me to spend the whole hour going through the details. But I want to explain to you what happens. So what happens, say today you've never done the keto diet, today you decide I'm going to try it, and you start eating a diet like that, what happens? So the first thing is that from your last meal, you have some sugar in your body, so your body starts to consume that. In about 4 hours, you run out of that, so you don't have any more sugar. Then your body goes to your stored glucose. So we can store sugar, but not a lot. We store it in our liver and our muscles. In about 2 days tops, you absolutely would use up all of your stored glucose. And that's why when you start dieting, if you're restricting calories, all of a sudden you lose a lot of weight in the first couple of days. It's because when we store sugar, it holds on to a lot of water. And as soon as that sugar is then released, the water goes along with it, and so we lose a lot of water. Next, your body is now you're going down into the basement looking for fats. So you're going to start burning your fats, and at some point, those fats shuttle off and into a sort of a different pathway and turn into something we call ketones. I'll show you a more detailed graph. So you're going to start producing ketones. The difference between normal fats and ketones, and there's quite a few differences, but fats cannot cross the blood-brain barrier. So you cannot use fats to fuel your brain, which is really important. Whereas ketones can cross the blood-brain barrier, which is why we can survive on a lot of ketones. But we couldn't survive just on fats, so the body's very clever. Ketones cross your brain. But even when you have ketones in your body, and you've all had ketones even when you're not on this diet in small amounts, even then, your body is still used to using sugar for fuel. So it takes a period of time, different for everybody, could be a few weeks before your body goes, okay, I prefer this new kind of fuel. I'm going to switch modes, and that's called being keto adapted. So the goal in a keto diet, whether you're using it for epilepsy or weight loss or anything, is to switch into keto adaptation, and that's a journey that some people, are able to make, and others may quit before. And there's a transition phase that can go really smoothly for some and pretty rocky for others. So I'll talk a bit about that. Don't worry about too much about the details here, but this is basically all this is showing is that you need sugar. We can never ever survive without any. So even if you have zero in your diet, you'll use it up from your diet, you'll use up your stores, your body is going to start making some. After a couple of days, your body starts to make sugar. And the reason for that is your brain still needs some. And you have other areas of your body, areas of your kidneys and such, that do need sugar. So you always have it. And I think it's really interesting that when you're on the keto diet, those sugars come from your fats. So when you start to break up your fat, this is a fat molecule, you have three sort of what we call fatty acids attached to a sugar backbone, like a spine. When they break apart, that sugar provides enough for you to survive. So now, don't worry about all the details here, but this is just showing that the three sources of fuel, so we use sugars, fats, and proteins, and normally they all come into the same, it's called this, if you remember back to high school, the Krebs cycle, they all enter into the cycle and break down, and the final, I guess the prize at the end is energy. You get this source of energy called ATP, and that energy allows your body to do everything it needs to do. But when we go into ketosis, those fats never enter the Krebs cycle and they shuttle off. And so it's really a different mode. It's not, there's different opinions. I mean, some people say it's a normal state. I don't agree, unless you consider state of starvation to be normal. But it's one that we can survive in, luckily. So that's that. And so then you start producing these ketones. Now there's different kinds of ketones in our body. One of them, if you've ever gone into ketosis, You may or may not have noticed a sweet smell on your breath, or some people sweat out an interesting odor. That's because some of the ketones can actually be exhaled through your lungs. And then usually that isn't something that continues, but it's described as nail polish remover in its smell, and it's actually, chemically speaking, pretty identical. So don't be alarmed if that happens. It's normal, although I have heard of people who couldn't get rid of the smell in their clothes, or different people respond differently. Now, if somebody is in a type 1 diabetic and they're having a crisis of a different kind, they can get very high ketone levels in their body and are rushed off to hospital. But that is not something that is going to happen in this diet, unless you're type 1 diabetic who forgets to take their insulin. So it's a very different thing. And this is just a very interesting and complicated graph, but this is just showing basically that your fats from your normal cells in your body shuttle off and into ketones here. There's different kinds of ketones. One of these ketones here, BHB, is something you can actually find in products. Like there's a product here called Keto 600. So you can actually take ketones as a supplement, and this is the form you will find it in. And this can cross into our cells in our brain. So that's an interesting look. Now, okay, how do you know if you're trying this diet, how do you know that you've made it, you've become keto adapted? So, someone finds that funny. So some people will describe, if you're lucky, things such as this. You're losing weight, you can think more clearly, steady energy, all kinds of stuff that sounds great. And I put the magic one because some people describe it as a magical transition, and it can be really easy for some people and great, and they say they felt never felt so great, and that's wonderful. But it's not that way for everybody because we're all different. It's not so easy a transition. As a very huge generalization, I would say it's easier for men, isn't everything, to go into ketosis because their hormones are less complicated than women. So we have more trouble and things coming up. And sometimes if it doesn't work, it's because we need to work on some other things and sort out some other issues before we can take on this change or stress to the body. So don't feel bad, or don't think that you're doing something wrong because you're not having the same experience as your friend or the blogger who's posting all of their great successes, because we're all different. And at the end of the day, don't listen to me or a blogger or anyone, listen to your body, because that is the best. And your body is telling you yes or no, and we always need to listen to our intuition, even though we can take the advice of some experts. And I'd also say, I've seen, because I practiced for many years, now the keto diet wasn't even a thing when I was practicing, so I didn't put my patients on it, but I also had people experiencing all these great symptoms, or relief of symptoms, or these great things here, with other kinds of transitions in diets, maybe just because they cut out refined carbohydrates. So this is not exclusive to the keto diet, that you can have a clear mind. Some people just cut out gluten and they have that, or so it's a shared thing. Now this is not a brand here, but I just pulled it off the internet. So some people take ketones as a supplement, and just a couple things I wanted to point out. One is that, this is not the ketone supplement, I'm on the wrong slide in my head. This is ketone strips. This is to measure your ketone levels. So if you want to know, am I getting into the ketosis or into this ideal state that we're looking for, you can test with blood, you can test with your breath, and you can test with urine strips. Most people, almost everyone, is going to use the urine strips because they're readily available, they're inexpensive. They're not as accurate, though, as other ways, but they're most accurate just from when you start to when you get keto adapted. You can see that your ketones are slowly going up. But once you become adapted, after a while, they're less accurate because as your body becomes efficient at using the ketones, and you actually are losing less of them. So when you measure them in your urine, it starts to look like the levels are dropping off. It's not because your ketone production is going down, it's because now you're using them, you're burning them as fuel. So they're more efficient just initially. So people will use those different ways to measure, showing, they go from 0 up to different opinions about what's the ideal level of ketones. As I mentioned before, for a type 1 diabetic, their levels can go extremely high, and it's very dangerous, but that is completely different because for someone who's a type 1 diabetic, when their ketones are through the roof, at the same time, their sugar levels are through the roof, which would never happen on the keto diet because your sugar levels should be normal but on the lower end, so it's a very different state. Now, there are all kinds of online helps to get the keto diet going, and what they essentially do is, so you have to have a certain amount of fats, carbohydrates, and proteins, but all of you are different and all of you require a different amount of calories. So say if I take a real average woman who's not completely sedentary, would take about 2,000 calories a day. And so using these different calculators, like on MyFitnessPal, which is one on the phone, and you can, I think, just scan the barcodes of products. Using that, it's going to tell you if you're eating a 2,000 calorie diet, then you need this many grams of carbohydrates, fats, and proteins at each and every meal. So it makes it really easy as it can get. But having said that, again, from my experience, at some point, what I wish for anybody who is trying any kind of diet like this is that at some point you let intuition take over and don't be controlled by numbers. Right? Our eating should not be mathematics. It should be just a natural. That's just some people love, I have patients that thrived on type A's calculating stuff and they did well, but it could be one of the reasons why many diets fail is because we're so stressed, and for a while we can keep up with it, and then, especially women, we're hard on ourselves, and then we fail, and we don't do it one day, and then we drop the whole thing. So trust yourself and your intuition at some point if you're on it, and give yourself a break and let yourself try to do it without the calculations. Now there's a book here, and I get no profit from its sales, it's not my book, but I did read it, The Keto Diet by Leanne Vogel, and I really like this book because she gives different options other than the absolute strict keto diet. And I think that she's open to that because she was vegan to begin with, so she went from one extreme to the other. And I like the fact that, she has this kind, personable approach. She has a lot of experience, so she will say, if you might want to try the classic keto diet and describe who that may work best for in her experience. So for pure weight loss, for anybody with insulin resistance, so that means, maybe you've been told that you're getting close to being diabetic, you better watch your blood sugar. Anyone who's carrying a lot of weight is likely to be insulin resistant, but I'm not diagnosing anyone here. Some people just won't do well on that classic keto diet, and so there's certainly leeway to introduce more protein, so that's another option. Some people can still be keto adapted and do perfectly well with more protein. Don't be, again, overly influenced by people who say, it won't work if you don't do it this way, because it may be the case for that person, but not for you. So there is experimenting that needs to go on. Even maybe it's possible to be vegan and in the keto diet. It's definitely going to be more challenging and it won't work for everybody. But the main point, I would say, is that if you want to try an alternative, you need to start by doing the strict keto diet, become keto adapted, and then only after that, try transition. So then you start playing with it, and you might land up, on a diet that's very different, but you're taking some of what you learn, the principles of the keto diet. Maybe you're learning that, oh, fats are not so scary, which they're not. And maybe you're learning how to deal with less refined carbohydrates, that you transition somewhere else. So just be open to that. So she has other variations where you have what she calls carb up. So in the evenings, occasionally you'll have extra carbohydrates because some people can't sleep well. They get, the low amounts of sugar, or cycling days on and days off. So there's all kinds of possibilities, or doing intermittent fasting. Not going to go through all of these because that would be like a 2-hour talk in itself, but she does a beautiful job of breaking down all kinds of different meal plans for each and every one of these, and I think it's fantastic. So now, this is what I was talking about before. So the keto supplements that are actual ketones, just a couple of things. One is that some people believe that you can take these instead of doing the diet. The problem with that is that if you're still eating carbohydrates or too many of them, then you will no longer be keto adapted. So even if you take ketones into your body's not going to use them because they're going to use the carbohydrates. So it's not a replacement for the keto diet. It's meant to be an addition to it. Secondly, these are synthetic forms, so it's not identical to your own ketones in your body. That's something that's important to think about. So if you're using a measuring, like those urine strips, they won't measure these ketones because they're synthetic, so they'll only measure your own. So you're not going to be getting the full picture, so you should be aware of that. So, potential uses for the keto diet, because I don't want to assume everyone's here for the same thing, but definitely drug-resistant epilepsy, it's being well proven. I think for insulin resistance, if I was in practice today and I had patients who had various forms of insulin resistance, maybe diabetic, or high cholesterol, polycystic ovarian syndrome, I might consider using this diet for a period of time, 3 months, 6 months, to help patients wean off medications if it was possible, because that is sometimes the case, that studies show that can be beneficial, that their insulin resistance can improve, and then I'd probably transition them into something more, easier to do. There's some evidence that may be helpful for various diseases of the brain, Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. Again, a whole other topic, and there's not enough evidence, really, frankly, to give you such specific information, but if people are already trying this and it's helping, then that's great. We'll come to learn more in the future. And even for some types of cancers, there's certain types of cancers where cells really thrive on sugar. Not all cancers are the same, but one example would be a very aggressive form of brain cancer called malignant glioma, and there are preliminary studies showing that a keto diet may be helpful for that. So certainly, I think all these things will evolve. So those are some of the other uses, but for many people, the most popular use is weight loss. So because there are so many studies on so many kinds of diet, and I wouldn't want to spend an hour going through them, one of the easiest and best ways to look at the evidence is to look at a meta-analysis. So that is where they take kind of all the studies done to date on the keto diet and comparing it to other diets, and that's what they did here. They looked at all of those. Sometimes they throw out studies that are not good studies and try to come to some kind of conclusion as best as we can, although it's hard to compare different diets, very hard, because it's often apples and oranges. Studies are using different populations. Some have diabetes, some are healthy, some are men, some are females, so it's all over the place, but as best as they can. The general conclusion was that in comparison to other diets, which are usually low-fat diets, it fared better, so weight loss was better. But when they looked longer term, up to 12 months or 1 year, there was really no difference between those other diets and the keto diet. And that can be for many reasons, but I suspect from my experience that compliance is one of the biggest ones. It's hard to maintain that or any kind of diet where we're overly restricting calories, or we can't go out to restaurants, or when we go to our family. It's hard. So I have the feeling that that is the main reason, but I can't say for sure. And their conclusion in terms of safety was short term for obesity and diabetes seems relatively safe, but long term we don't know. There's no long-term studies like 2 years, 3 years. We have no idea, and we don't really have any population in the past to look at, even though some people compare the keto diet to some others, but there isn't really. I'll speak a little to that. What are some of the pros of the keto diet? So here's where I'm trying to give the two sides. So I think it's great that we've gotten over that myth that fat is bad and that fat makes us fat. So I think we're much more aware of that, even though there still are good and bad fats, but processed and natural ones. Also, I think it's excellent to address insulin resistance. Insulin resistance, I think, is something that's more common than we know, because by the time you get diagnosed with diabetes, you can have 10 years of insulin resistance, which means your insulin is creeping up and up and up and up and up, trying to keep your sugars down, and it does a good job of that. So every time your doctor measures your sugars, they're normal. This insulin is struggling, going up, and eventually it doesn't work anymore. So your cells become resistant. They're sort of not paying attention to insulin anymore, and then at that time we're diagnosed. So a lot of people, and that's where you have like a nutritionist or naturopath can help you, before those 10 years are up, to avoid that. I love that the keto diet doesn't restrict calories. That's never worked. I think we really know now if you restrict calories too much, then you'll end up in the yo-yo dieting and it gets worse and worse. So that's good. And the removal of refined carbohydrates, definitely a good thing. Those are not good for anybody. And I think it tastes good. I mean, I have some meals that are classified as keto meals, even though I don't eat that diet. That is tasty. So some of the cons, and this isn't going to represent something for everyone, but for some people, the keto diet is a stress response. Because if we're in starvation, that is stressful. So our stress hormones do go up initially, and they might level off depending, but that is something to keep in mind for anyone who's already in a state of stress, which can affect our bodies dramatically. For some people, and maybe this is more athletes or people who do really short bursts of exercise, intense, the keto diet can be difficult for them, because if you do that kind of intense exercise, sugars are much faster fuel and ketones take longer. There's been reports of thyroid irregularities on this diet, but we're not sure why. It could just be stress related, because stress can definitely cause your thyroid to slow down. Or it could be that some people are getting overzealous and restricting their calories without knowing it, because they feel better, they're not craving foods as much, and they forget to eat, so that can happen. So it's just something to watch out for. Loss of food variety. So for me, I think that that's my perspective. Is I think that beans and legumes are great, and I even think that whole grains for some or many people, if they're well, I don't want to go into the whole grain thing, but I think there's a loss of the enjoyment and the variety of a lot of foods, and the lack of long-term safety studies. So we don't know, but it's fantastic to me if short-term it really gets you on the right track, or really helps you, or gets you off medications, then great. Possible nutrient deficiencies that can be argued all day. You'll see online different things. There's a lot of speculation because we just don't know. So I'm going to address some of those potential deficiencies, but just keep in mind, I'm not telling you that you have this deficiency, because I don't know it. I'm just telling you what some of the potential and what you can do supplement-wise or food-wise to maybe address that. Now, if anyone has gone into ketosis already, you may or may not have experienced what's called the keto flu. So be aware of this if you're thinking of trying it, that for not everybody, but for a portion of people, those first few days when you're transitioning feel really awful. And I actually experienced all of these because I did a 3-day fast for reasons I won't get into. But on my 3rd day, I had everything here, so I felt awful, and I realized, and I was really hoping for, because I heard people, when you fast, you hit that 3rd day and you have bounds of energy and clarity, and I had none of that, so I had all of these. So that's something that can happen, and there may be ways to mitigate this, no guarantee, but one of the theories is that because you're losing a lot of water, you're also losing electrolytes, salt, magnesium, potassium, and that could cause some or all of these symptoms. So I will get into sort of how to address that. Other reported side effects, again, not for everybody, and some of them may just be you have them for a while, but then they work themselves out. But that's the dragon breath, is when you're exhaling ketones. This is pretty much for anyone. You can't tolerate alcohol well, so if you love your alcohol, this is not the diet for you. Intestinal issues, probably in many cases because people are overly restricting vegetables, not getting enough fiber. I think people can, on the whole, eat more vegetables than they think on the keto diet, and I love this chart I saw over here. This is another supplement company, just put like a food pyramid, the keto diet. But on the, it's on the top, okay, it's on the reverse of how I thought, never mind. I thought vegetables were the most emphasized, but it's the opposite. Anyway, I think you ought to play around with that, because if you're getting to a state where you're getting very constipated, that's a sign your body's saying that this is not good right now and you need to do something about it. Osteoporosis, so losing some bone, and kidney stones, these are from studies done on children, so for epilepsy. So there were studies on those who had used this diet more long term, but you're not children here with epilepsy, but we still should take some caution about these studies and what they suggested. They're also children are growing and they need more nutrients, so it's just something to think about or be aware of. I think it's always a good idea to talk to your doctor if you're going to do this, just in case. But here's a list of many things that may be pre-existing conditions that might make the keto diet less effective for you, or maybe less safe. There's no, again, hard and fast rules about it, but for example, impaired liver function, it's very vague. This is just a general list of stuff, but if you have no gallbladder, and so you can't process fats very well, maybe the keto diet is going to be more difficult. So always just let your doctor know, be wise about it. Pregnancy and lactation, that's the one where I strictly say, really don't do this unless you're under someone's advice. And I can't see anyone who would put a pregnant woman on such a diet, but be really careful with that one. So in terms of for the keto flu that I mentioned that some people go through, here are the 3 recommended things. 1, drink a lot of water, because you're losing water in those days. You want to replenish those electrolytes, so you can do that by way of food or supplements, and I'll show you some details. And light activity. So sometimes just being very stagnant and sitting all day can make us more likely to especially have muscle cramps. Start with some feedback here. So here's some examples of supplements that may be helpful. Probably best to start at some days before the diet. But something like this, which is just giving us a good range of minerals, potassium and magnesium are those 2 common electrolytes that can cause some of those symptoms. And so this this sort of covers. And the reason I like this is because the calcium and magnesium in this formula are at the exact same amount, whereas your average bone supplement is not. And you might need more magnesium on the keto diet, or at least in this initial stage. For muscle cramps, magnesium is a common thing to take. And you could use this is just a very well absorbed form, but these magnesium flakes or topical magnesium are sort of unique. You're probably familiar with Epsom salts, right? Epsom salts, love Epsom salts. Epsom salts are actually a different kind of magnesium. They're magnesium sulfate. This type of magnesium, which is a different form, is more readily taken up by your cells, so it's better to help you for general low magnesium levels. The Epsom salts have their own benefits. They're good for skin issues, they have other, but they're not as effective, and there are studies on this type of magnesium. So that can be helpful. If you're the type of person who likes to take a bath or shower, you can soak in the magnesium flakes, or putting magnesium topically is more effective if you do it right after you've had a bath or shower, because your pores are open wide, and studies show even if you like sort of rub it after you apply it, it works a bit better. Some people may require extra fiber and so prebiotics. Prebiotics, if you're not familiar with that, is a type of fiber that feeds your good bacteria. It is, I can say 100% for sure, just based on not the keto diet, but on many different studies, that if when you shift your diet to a high animal food diet, if it's very different, a lot more meat, less vegetables, your gut bacteria will shift too. And so if you want to maintain a healthy gut, you either got to really increase your vegetable intake or rely on a supplement to feed that bacteria. Otherwise, you're starving it of its normal food. And there's all kinds of fibers. So I'm showing you a couple here. Glucomannan is a fiber that comes from one of my favorite food products, which, oh, okay, that's a one further on, but they sell it here. It's not made by our company. Konjac root is, to me, this is kind of miraculous. So this is like spaghetti, but it's actually just 100% fiber. So 0 calories, no effect on your blood sugar. It's actually good for your blood sugar. So I will make a lovely giant soup at home and eat this entire bag. It's filling, and yeah, I just think it's an amazing invention. It's my favorite thing. Oops. Enzymes. So enzymes can be helpful. They're like the Pac-Mans of our digestive system. If you're experiencing any kind of digestive stress when you're transitioning or with a new diet, enzymes can always help. And I'm specifically highlighting this one because it has in it bile. So bile is what your liver produces, and then your gallbladder catches it like a sack. And when you eat a meal, especially a high fatty meal, that bile helps to break up the fats into small particles so they're easier to digest. So given that we're eating unusually large amount of fats, having extra bile may be helpful. So an enzyme that has the bile in it. I'm not specifically suggesting this to anyone, but one of the theories as to why some people lose their hair in the keto diet, which can happen for some temporarily, may be a biotin deficiency. I wouldn't say that this is anything that's proven, but a mouse study suggested that's possible. Biotin deficiency is not that common. There's other possibilities, like it's a stress response, especially if you start the keto diet and then you lose your hair 3 months into it. That's how long the cycle of your hair takes. Usually if you have a very stressful event in your life, hair loss will take place about 3 months after, and you might not link the two. Or thyroid. Always think about your thyroid. So there's different reasons. Many people plateau when it comes to weight loss because of stress. I've seen it, and if you understand how the body works, it actually makes complete sense. when we're into, you've all heard of that stress response, tiger is chasing us, your body wants to give you all the fastest fuel it can to run from that tiger, which is sugar. So for some people, if you hit a wall with a keto diet, it could be stress, and then you need to manage that stress, or hopefully manage it before. Sometimes I remember in my practice, I would just treat someone's stress. I'd give them this or some other stress support, and they would lose weight, even though that wasn't even our goal, because that was really keeping their body in a state where it was hard to lose weight. This is another one of those, so some people say, you see on some blogs saying you need to supplement with selenium if you're on the keto diet, and this is the reason. This is a study, long-term study that showed, and again, this is in children, however, those who are on the keto diet, especially those up to a year, half of them were deficient in selenium, which is a really important nutrient for our immune system. So that may be one that I would be cautious of. If you've been on this for 6-12 months, you might want to consider selenium. Selenium is in all multivitamins, so you'll get some different amounts, but that is something. Unfortunately, you just can't go out and measure selenium levels from your doctor. It's not the kind of thing that we can, but vitamin C, probably won't hear about this. This is some of my own, looking in the keto diet, I thought, well, if you're really restricting your fruits and vegetables, you don't get vitamin C from animal foods. So the only way you can really get it, and so there's a potential for vitamin C deficiency. So if you've noticed things like maybe bleeding gums or any sort of sign of vitamin C deficiency, you might want to supplement with it. And I take it every day just for other reasons. This particular one here has an antioxidant in it that helps to recycle vitamin C, so it's sort of like a time release. That's one other thing. Another category that may be low in the keto diet is flavonoids. If you're not familiar with that term, if you read about nutrition, or if you listen to, say you read a blog by a nutritionist, you often see people, even in a lot of products here, talking about the glories of flavonoids, or bioflavonoids. Those give our fruits and vegetables all those lovely bright colors. There's thousands of types of flavonoids, and they're often known to protect us against damage of oxidants, maybe protect us from developing cancers. And these are all of the best sources. You'll notice no animal food, so that too may be an area where you may be lacking, depending. You can get them from a lot of spices, but if you're not cooking flavorful foods, like turmeric, that may be another area where a supplement. So I'm trying to, just stress here that if you are, just to rethink what you're already taking, these may be some things that anyone could take, that I could, like a lot of people use antioxidants, that may be more applicable if you're eating a very restricted diet. MCT oil, if you've been on this, you'll know about it. Who here has never heard of MCT oil? So I know how much. Okay, just a few. So MCT oil, it's a special, it's an extract from coconut oil. They extract very particular fats from the coconut that are kind of shorter fats. So normally if you eat long chains of fats, those are like bricks, and they're very good at piling up, building a wall and storing fat. They just store really nicely. But these short chains are not great for storage, so they break down very easily for fuel, and that makes them particularly compatible with the keto diet as a fuel that's easy to burn. It's a kind of fat that's easy on your digestion, so if you have digestive issues with fats, you're less likely to have problems with MCT oil. So in that sense, it's really good. Ours is in a glass bottle because Now Company, we have, as I said, a lot of labs and very sophisticated testing. We do stability testing on every product, so we found that the plastic would leach into the MCT oil over like 6 months or so. We test up to a year, so that's why ours is in a glass bottle. So MCT oil, I'd say MCT oil maybe is the most popular supplement for the keto diet, and it does make sense. It makes sense. What a lot of people don't know, as a great complement to it, is lecithin. So lecithin, this is just a study here, that essentially says that lecithin can help you absorb your MCT oil better. The reason it does that is if you go and look at even, if you go to an ordinary grocery store, you will see lecithin in hundreds and hundreds of products. It's an emulsifier. So it's used in the food industry to take fats and water and help them mix effortlessly so that, God forbid, you don't have to mix your peanut butter because the oil is not floating on the top. So it helps everything mix together. I use it all the time because I put it in my protein shake. So if I put any kind of fats, MCT oil, coconut oil, any fats in the protein shake, a little bit of lecithin will help them mix really well so that even 4 hours later when I take my shake out of my bag, it's still mixed. It hasn't separated. So it has that nice value, but in your body too, it will make fats easier to break up. So if you have trouble with fats, that could be something you can try to add. I like the liquid one, and one of the perceived advantages to this is it's a sunflower source, and most lecithins come from soy. It's still the same in the end, but it's not from soy. Most soy, of course, is genetically modified. There are foods, of course, you can eat to get your electrolytes. I wanted to emphasize, for salt, you don't need to buy any supplement, just use a salt or a bouillon cube. That can be something if you're going through the transition. I would encourage you to have bouillon cube unless your doctor has strictly restricted you on salt. Potassium, so you can't use bananas, but avocado is an even better source, and it's great for the keto diet. So that'll probably be one of my big recommendations. Someone asked me earlier if I have recipes. I have a few, but I mean, you can't really read them. That's not practical in a talk like this, but they're on our website. And a very popular keto food, and I make them myself because it's just a great, healthier dessert, is what they call often a fat bomb. It's like, because you usually make it in a round little bowl, it contains a lot of fat, and usually combined with a safer natural sweetener like stevia. So we have over here the liquid stevias. They're really lovely. I use them for, now I know this is not for tonight's audience, but we have a maple one, so I make maple flavored popcorn. But you can use them in teas, and if you make the kind of bulletproof coffee with butter, then you can sweeten it and flavor it. So they're very versatile. There's just another recipe on our website, Vanilla Energy Coconut Balls. This is just a copy of the bulletproof type of breakfast. So coffee, butter. Now we have an MCT oil that's vanilla hazelnut flavored, and I combine that with the French vanilla stevia. So it's quite a delicious drink. I don't have this every morning, but I am a coffee drinker, so I have tried this and it's nice. You do need to always emphasize, you do need to chew sometimes, because that's actually important for our teeth. So you shouldn't be on liquids 3 times a day, but then there's a lot of great sweeteners as alternatives. In my book, The Confident Food Shopper, I go through all the details about all of the artificial sweeteners and the problems with them. So definitely the natural sweeteners are a better alternative. Erythritol is a very popular one that Leanne Vogel in her book, The Keto Diet, she talks about a lot in recipes. You can replace that with sugar. It has a sugary kind of feel. So we've got some bags over there. It's not quite as sweet as sugar, so you need a little bit more. Stevia, again, is 0 calories. Erythritol, pretty much 0 calories as well, so you can use these. And from what I know, this is the only one in Canada. in retail stores, we have erythritol icing. So it's just a fine erythritol, whereas if you just mix it with some water and vanilla extract, you can make keto-friendly icing, so you can make any kind of keto-friendly dessert and cover it with the icing, and it's delicious. I have a bag at home, but I haven't tried it yet. But that's really popular for desserts. I often do a meal on the run. In fact, tonight, you wouldn't tell, but that is my protein shake. So if you want to make it more than keto compatible, you just have to up the fats. So my favorite fats would be MCT oil, full fat coconut milk is lovely, and avocado. So that's a lot of fat. You would put in some protein, depending on your calorie count, and then some kind of natural sweetener like erythritol and stevia. I feel like when it's so hard for all of us to eat healthy, busy lives, that sometimes it can be really helpful for one meal of the day to blend it in 3 minutes so you can focus your time making 2 other delicious meals. It's hard to make 3. I look forward to the day I'm retired, then I'm just going to cook all day. Nuts, as I said, are great, and probably what this is showing here is the ratios of fat, proteins, and carbs of different nuts. So these are really at the very highest in terms of the keto diet, the most compatible. So macadamia nut and pecans are where you get the most fat and the lowest carbs. And it doesn't hurt that macadamia nuts are delicious, right? Anyone here hate macadamia nuts? They're just delicious. So, chew your nuts, enjoy them, but of course you can throw them into many recipes. Almond flour is popular for the keto diet. I've been using it for a while. I now have to hide anything I make from my nieces because they love my almond cookies. And I love them, but they're not worth $5 a cookie. Because that's how much it costs. Almond flour it's lovely, but it's expensive. Chia and flax seeds are 2 great foods you can add to add fiber to this diet. So they're very high in fat and low in carbs. And this basically here is saying it's also great as an egg substitute. Because when you're eating so many animal foods, to be able to, especially if you're trying to do a more vegan, or not be too heavy on animal foods, they work brilliantly. I've never had an issue with any recipe I've used using them as an egg substitute. So you buy them ground up and you mix it with a little bit of warm water, and they get jelly and sticky like an egg, and it works very well. So I often love also chia and flax in my shakes, maybe chia even more so because it thickens them up to the point that eventually you can turn your shake over and nothing will come out. And the thicker your shakes are, the more full you will feel. You don't want to have a very runny shake because you'll digest it so quickly you won't feel full. So by adjusting the water level and adding these thickeners, it can really help. Hemp seeds I love because we don't have to grind them up. They're very easy to toss into anything. So I eat a lot of those. This, if you haven't heard of, is chia water, which you just basically take the whole chia seeds, add them into water, and just let it sit for a while. And you'll notice it becomes this jelly-looking water. And I've even seen products being sold. I don't know if they have them here, but you can buy chia water or flavored chia water. This can help between meals to kind of ward off your hunger without really spiking your blood sugar at all. And Leanne Vogel, in her book, again, she talks about this as a suggested in-between meals. I have the feeling one day chia seeds are not well studied, but we're going to find out that that jelly stuff is really good for our gut, like for healing. Because if you look at many different herbs historically that are healing on the gut, they're always slippery and slimy, like okra and slippery elm. So I love chia seeds. Anything coconut is compatible. I usually use coconut flakes if I have yogurt. Coconut flour is a little less compatible. It's not as much fat. So just have a look at the breakdown, but it's still fine. It's just all how you put the whole thing together. I've already expressed my love for konjac noodles, but I didn't show you who else loves them. Where is that? So I make a vegan cheese to put on the konjac noodles. I'm showing this recipe because other than the fact that nutritional yeast is very healthy and has a lovely cheesy taste, which is amazing, some people on the keto diet may develop issues from too much dairy in terms of being clogged up on a diet that already tends to constipate. There's some evidence that dairy might even spike our insulin, but it's still kind of not well understood. So I think that from my experience, again, of many years, too much dairy caused a lot of my patients' problems, but it depends on the kind of dairy, you know, is it nice, organic, fermented yogurt, or is it I don't know, what's that cheese called that comes with a cow on it and that, yeah, very different. So this is lovely, and the person who loves konjac noodles and nutritional yeast is my niece Limona. So every time she's eating it, I have to take a picture because she's absolutely devouring. So I'd like to show that. Why do diets fail? Because you want to be hopefully successful in whether you try it or not, and whatever avenue you take, but difficult to manage is, I think, the #1 reason. And I'm going to recommend a book to you for that, for managing anything. It doesn't have to do with keto diet. I'll show you shortly. Calorie restriction, again, I think because if we're depriving ourselves, diets never last, and it shouldn't be in a keto diet, but I think some people slowly slip into that without knowing it. And expectations. You know, just need to be patient with ourselves. We need to realize that we're all different. Our journeys will all be different. Don't judge yourself. Don't expect too much, but just sort of go with the flow and pay attention again to your body and make sure that you don't ignore when your body is saying, you know, I'm feeling really bad. So when I did that 3-day fast, I didn't go into a 4th because, you know, I had rapid heart rate and all kinds. That was definitely my body's way of saying, you know, cut this off now. This is a great book, not here, but you can actually listen to it or buy it. Atomic Habits. I love this book because I think that the #1 reason for, you know, sort of failure in anything we take on is that we're just oriented at a quick fix kind of world these days, and developing proper habits. This book is excellent. Proper habits are the best way to be successful versus what most people think is that they can, you know, will themselves, like say you want to take on exercise and you're going to, with all your strength and your will, it just doesn't work for most people. Making things habitual, and it's not as simple as it sounds, although it is very helpful. So, for example, I play guitar, and if I didn't have my guitar outside where I can trip on it every day, I wouldn't practice it if I put it away in the cupboard. So this is a great book if you find that you just keep, you're not able to develop easy routines. It has to be easy and effortless at some point. So will the diet work for you? I just say when it comes to everything that all of these things play a factor into what diet is best for who. Your genetics, right? Our genetics predetermine in many cases, not as a final thing, but our diet is passed down in terms of what we can tolerate. Just look at lactose intolerance. If you're from Eastern Europe, you're much more likely to have it, or Asian. Our sex, the season. So we're meant to eat heavy foods. Like the keto diet is ideal for the Arctic. But anywhere where it's a hot tropical country, you won't see people eating that kind of diet at that time of year. In the summer, we all naturally gravitate towards lighter foods and fruits and vegetables that are growing, activity level, and so all kinds of different things. I'm showing these 3 diets because some people will say, oh, well, the keto diet's like the Inuit diet, right? They ate a lot of fat and they were fine, or the paleo diet is like our ancestors. I personally disagree with all of this because I think that none of these diets are anything like the ones that we're taking on until you start eating all the parts of the animal, the kidneys and the liver, and in a raw state, then you're not eating like, because that's how the Inuit diet was. Plus, they were incredibly active and living in a cold climate all year round, so we can never really compare. We can get a little bit of information, but our lives are completely different. You don't have their genes, and we're not eating it. Liver and kidneys and all these different parts of the animal are actually the most nutritious parts, but we don't eat them. Now we're getting into like the bones and the bone block, but not yet into the other parts. As a general commentary, if you read my book, The Confident Food Shopper, you'll see where I'm coming from. If someone were to ask me, am I at any risk long-term for this diet, then using what I know and what is important to me, eating more animal foods globally puts us all at risk for, antibiotic resistance, which is a huge issue now, and all of these other things, and global warming. And this is because of factory farming. It's nothing to do specifically with the keto diet. It's because our animals are coming from factory farming. So I highly encourage you to try, if you can afford, to buy animals that are that are healthier for you, that are not factory farmed. I don't think that does your body any good. So for whatever diet you choose and however you do it, try to source your animals free range. And these are the big principles that are maybe boring and not very sexy to talk about, but I think these are the fundamentals that you can apply to any kind of diet and will make you better off. Homemade and fresh, it's just, it's unbelievable what we've done through our food system. And the lack of knowledge, from that farm to fork of what has happened to our foods. I put this slide here just because I know that if I don't, from my experience, that someone's going to ask me, Dr. Charney, what would be your preferred diet? So if I had to pick one, if I absolutely had to, just based on evidence, because there's so much evidence, I'd say the Mediterranean diet has the most solid evidence for overall mortality, like for heart disease, cancer, obesity, and everything. There's pretty solid evidence that this is a good diet, if that's what you're looking for, overall protection. But it can be modified, so, or ketofied, maybe a bit. So incorporating more fats, taking out refined carbohydrates, adding intermittent fasting. There's so many variations of what you can do. That would be, I'd say, to me, the best evidence. Best evidence doesn't mean the best diet. It just means the most studied. And you won't see anybody writing about the Mediterranean diet as being harmful. This is the book that I've referred to again and again. I haven't read any of the other books on the keto diet, so I am biased, but I think that as a lay person, she does a phenomenal job of opening up a lot of options, so I do recommend that. And that lady is me. So I do recommend my book, not because I slaved over it for 7 years, but because my passion has always been for food as medicine, and this book was written specifically for Canadians, and there's all the books out there on ingredients are for Americans, and the details are about American labels. So I did the research, and this book doesn't just tell you basic things like about your ingredients to red flag, which it does, and about the nutrition facts label, but it goes into a lot of detail about all kinds of other things, such as what are all the hidden ingredients in our linings of our cans and our bottles, antibiotics and things that you can't see looking at a label. It tells you a lot of great tips. So if you're shopping and you want to know why should I get Manuka honey versus regular, and how is it better, and how do I read the labels? Or why is Swiss water decaf coffee better than other decaf? Sorting through all those things, it can give you a lot of information about processed products. All of those complicated claims. So if you're eating a lot of animal foods, there's all kinds of grass-fed and free range, and a lot of confusing and misleading labels. I go through those as well so that you can pick the best product. So I changed the title at the end because one of my favorite quotes from this movie, Starsky and Hutch, there's a character in there called Huggy Bear. I don't know if you've seen the movie. And he says, I lay it all out for y'all to play it out. Which in his language means, I just like to lay out the information, but then it's up to you what to do with it. I love just leaving people take the responsibility, although some people like me to tell them what to do, but that's not especially as I'm not your own doctor. Not for me to say, and I hope that I've helped you in some way tonight, whether it's to encourage you or send you on a different path. I hope you found it helpful, and I would love to take questions to clarify anything. But I just wanted to, before I go into that, say that I'd really appreciate it if you can fill out the feedback form for me. So I'm going to be doing a lot of consumer talks, and it's good for me to know. So you can do that while I'm taking questions. And I'll just say I didn't put my disclaimer slide, but as every speaker does, it is important to say that anything that I tell you is not personal medical advice for yourself. And that when I give advice to my patients, I've spent 3 hours with them and reviewed everything in their history and their blood test and medication. So always run something by somebody who knows you better. And I'll try my best to answer your questions, even though I don't know all of them. Oh, one question already.
Sauerkraut on the keto diet. Good?
Sauerkraut. I was asking about sauerkraut on the keto diet. Same as with any vegetable. I encourage you to try eat as many as you can, which is an experiment. You probably start from a more restricted fruits and vegetables till you feel that you're keto adapted, and then I would try to push the boundaries as much as you can. And cabbage is a wonderful food. I love sauerkraut. Eden Organics, they have that here. As much as any other vegetable, I think it's fine, but I am a fan of the fermented vegetables, very healthy. Yeah. No specific